Hello, I'm Andrew from Limitless Park, and I love going to Disney World. I love flying on a plane to Disney World, and that's it. Now, if only there were some sort of ride at Walt Disney World that would make me feel like I was traveling on some sort of airline. Now that would be right up my alley. Wait!
Long before Pixar rubbed its musk all over Tomorrowland, there was a different attraction that Walt Disney World guests could enjoy. And it didn't cost anything to ride, except for your time, your patience, your will, your soul. That attraction was If You Had Wings, sponsored by Eastern Airlines.
That's right, this was in the era where Disney was way into getting sponsors for rides, something that just isn't as prevalent today.
Except in most cases, Disney would usually come up with an attraction and then try to find a sponsor to fit that ride. Like when they made a space roller coaster called Space Mountain and got RCA to sponsor it. You know RCA, the media electronics company. Okay, bad example, but point is, first came the ride, then the sponsor.
But in If You Had Wings case, the sponsor came first. You see, an old airline company called Eastern Airlines came to Disney with reportedly around $10 million and said, hey, make us something. So Disney said, well, we do have this big space-themed roller coaster with an RCA-shaped hole that you could probably fill. But Eastern Airlines wanted something that appealed more to their company. Something that promoted the more exotic places that they traveled, like Mexico and the Caribbean. New Orleans. I'm not sure how exotic New Orleans is, but I am sure that this was basically just a commercial for Eastern Airlines, which, hey, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I know plenty of commercials that I would like to see turned into Disney rides.
So, Disney went ahead with building an Eastern Airlines attraction. It would be shoehorned into the eastern side of the Circle Vision Theater, and honestly, as I'm saying this, I wonder if Disney chose that location just because of the name of the sponsor. But regardless, this did not give Disney a ton of space to work with.
So what do you do when you're Disney and you don't have a lot of space to build an attraction? You bring in Claude Coates, of course. At least, that's what the manual said.
That's right. First name Claude, last name Coates was an expert show designer who worked on tons of different attractions. If anyone was good at creating rides in a limited amount of space, it was him. And so Disney went with the Omnimover system for If You Had Wings. Now for those who don't know what an Omnimover is, it's not a dinosaur that eats plants and animals, but it's actually a ride system where the cars are all attached in one big slow-moving train. This system was first utilized in the Disneyland attraction that is well known for its creepy, haunting atmosphere and sense of dread. That's right, I'm talking about Adventures Through Inner Space at Disneyland.
If You Had Wings primarily used special projections that Coates came up with, along with static props and set pieces. There were no animatronics. So before you start bitching about the lack of animatronics in all current Disney rides, remember, bitching was invented back in 1972. So If You Had Wings opened that year on June 5th, exactly 4 years after Robert Kennedy was assassinated. You can't have one without the other.
Thanks to the Omnimover system, there was almost never a line to ride. And the attraction was free, which is just a crazy concept to me. I mean, I've been slipping the magic carpets of Aladdin ride operator $20 each time I go on it for years.
I kid. But this was back in the day when ticket books were a thing. You see, it wasn't always pay one price and get access to all the rides in the park. Instead, you'd have to buy a ticket book which had different tickets for different rides. You would exchange those in order to ride. You would have a set amount that you could ride throughout the day. The tickets were based on the popularity of the ride. For instance, the A ticket was the lowest and the easiest to get on, and the E ticket was the most popular. That's where the term E ticket actually comes from. You see, if Disney installs a ride such as Guardians of the Galaxy or Tron in the park, people will usually call it an E-ticket. Back in the day, E-tickets were Hall of Presidents or Country Bear Jamboree. These were different times. Dysentery was way more common back then.
But on the opposite end of the spectrum was If You Had Wings, a ride that was free and didn't take any ticket to get on. That's right, if you wanted, you could just loop around on that thing all day. It's a me from the beginning of the video's biggest dream. So you walk up to If You Had Wings and you're greeted with a thin white pylon displaying the ride logo in the most bland font I've ever seen. That thing is like a step above Arial and I am disappointed. But then I look down a bit and my disappointment is eased because I see the Eastern Airlines logo reminding me that I'm about to ride on a commercial.
I walk up to the entrance like the child I am when all of a sudden a female greeter in an Eastern Airlines stewardess outfit walks up to me and says hello, and then offers me a pair of flying wings. I proceed accordingly by running past her screaming because I have a fear of pins and beautiful women in that order.
So then comes the cue for the attraction. You see the modern white walls, the beautiful blue carpet. You hear the music from the attraction blaring at like 5 million decibels because all the projections on the ride had loud fans and Disney chose to just turn up the volume for the song to drown them out, and now my ears are bleeding. But then you head onto those moving walkways and board your vehicle, and you enter under a giant globe, which of course has an Eastern Airlines plane flying around it. Do you ever think the Soarin' pilots and the Eastern Airline pilots ever like to wave at each other in the sky? Like Patrick Warburton just leans out the window of the plane and waves before crashing into the leaning Eiffel Tower? Anyways, while you're entering under the globe, you can hear an announcer listing off all sorts of different flights.
Attention please. Eastern Airlines Flight 72, your Fiesta flight to Mexico and the ancient pyramids, now departing at Gate 19.
I want to get this guy to read at my funeral. He is good.
As you're riding, you begin to hear the If You Had Wings song that plays throughout the attraction. It was composed by my buddy Buddy Baker, and the lyrics were written by Adults Only Atencio. He's the guy who wrote Grim Grinning Ghosts along with a ton of other songs for Disney, and you can definitely tell he was still putting in tremendous effort for this song. It's so catchy, similarly to how Small World is catchy, but I'd say a bit less repetitive and earwormy. After you pass through the globe comes the takeoff scene, where you can see off to the side that animated seagulls are flying next to you, except those seagulls end up morphing into Eastern Airlines jets.
Evolution at its finest.
From the sky you can spot an Aztec pyramid, and you ride through it into the next scene, Ancient Mexico. That's right, Eastern Airlines invented time travel. Just kidding, it's just a way to segue into modern Mexico, where you can hear a mariachi band playing the If You Had Wings song.
I actually requested the mariachi band at my local Mexican restaurant to play the If You Had Wings song, and they doubled my bill.
After passing through Mexico, as most do, you head to the Caribbean. You enter under a cruise ship with people waving and saying Bon Voyage, and like, come on, this doesn't make me want to fly, this makes me want to sail Carnival. Then you pass the marketplace, and you can see all sorts of straw hats and straw cups. This is followed by an underwater location where divers are looking for treasure. Again, it's kind of amazing that they didn't use any animatronics to portray this, instead going with a blend of screens and cutout set pieces. It's not my favorite look in the world, but it's definitely unique. There's also a steel drum band behind them banging away at the If You Had Wings theme song. Also similar to Small World is how the music essentially changes with the scene. It's the same song, but a different take on it, which I happen to like a lot.
Next up is the Puerto Rico scene, where you can actually see the same fort that the fort in Pirates of the Caribbean was modeled after. Now, I'm not going to attempt to say the name of the fort because I was diagnosed with not being able to roll my R's, but here's a picture of it. See? Same fort.
And of course, If You Had Wings follows up the Puerto Rico scene with the Bahamas scene, like any good If You Had Wings would. There you can find 3 separate screens, the center one with a very obviously blue screen traffic cop who is directing pedestrians and flamingos into the other 2 screens.
There's a marching band playing the song too. I actually went back to my old high school and asked the marching band there if they would play the If You Had Wings song. They just all stared at me until one of them finally piped up and said, "Sir, this isn't a Denny's." So that was fun.
After that, we hit Jamaica, where people are climbing up some waterfalls like they're about to die, great for a family theme park. And then we have exotic New Orleans, which is during Mardi Gras.
Look, I've seen what Bourbon Street can become at night, and it is many things, but I wouldn't call it exotic. But I digress.
After New Orleans, you hit the speed tunnel. This is an effect that has been used in tons of other Disney rides since, from World of Motion to things like Buzz Lightyear and Disneyland's Old People Mover. It basically acts as a way to make you feel like you're traveling way faster than you are. After the speed tunnel comes the Mirror Room. This part shows reflected scenes of the mountains, deserts, and all kinds of other stuff that you saw while you were in the speed tunnel. And then, just like that, riders hit the descent scene where you pass by the seagull projections again, and then you land and get off the ride. Also, as the ride is ending, you can hear the announcer for the ride saying,
"You do have wings. You can do all these things. You can lighten your world. We will be your wings."
And man, every time I hear this, I feel like I'm having a bad nightmare or like I'm being hypnotized. Like, man, I don't know. If I heard this on the actual ride, I probably would have been under some sort of mind control that would have caused me to book an Eastern Airlines flight.
Good thing there weren't any travel desks with Eastern Airlines representatives ready to book flights for you after you got off the ride. What?! Yeah, so after the ride, you would get off and there would be actual Eastern Airlines customer service representatives there to help you book a flight. Now, I could see this happening every once in a while. Maybe a family gets off and says, "Damn, Jamaica was looking pretty Jamaica-y. Why don't we book a flight there?" But in general, advertising for another vacation while a lot of people at Walt Disney World were already on vacation, comes off as a little overkill. So that was If You Had Wings. Definitely a weird attraction in Disney history, and one that probably leaned into the idea of a sponsorship ride more than any other. Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, as sponsorships for a ride can lead to a larger budget. It's not a surefire thing, but if the sponsor matches the ride, why not? But in If You Had Wings case, where the sponsor came first, I'm not exactly sure that it was the best attraction that Disney could have built. Now, I know some people did really like this ride, and that's great. Plus, it's a Disney attraction where you didn't have to pay to ride in an era where all the attractions cost a certain amount of money. So combine that with getting out of the hot Florida sun as many times as you want in an Omnimover system that's air conditioned, I'd say that's a win regardless of the quality of the ride. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking. Andrew, you weren't even alive when If You Had Wings was around. How could you possibly judge an attraction that you haven't even ridden? Well, to that I say, yeah, don't take my opinion seriously.
At the end of the day, If You Had Wings was definitely a great way to satiate any lust for air travel that you didn't already get from flying down to Walt Disney World. Sadly, Eastern Airlines was going through some financial troubles and, on June 1st, 1987, would shut down and withdraw their sponsorship, and the ride was closed.
There would never be an airplane-based attraction at Walt Disney World ever again. Oh God. Well, this is the only day that I booked out on my calendar to talk about plane-based attractions at Walt Disney World. So, maybe next year.